My name is Andy Reese, and I'm with the ministry called the Freedom Resource, and I'm here to share with you some stories and some truth about Papa God. I want to tell you a story about a woman named Betsy, and Betsy was a friend of ours, and she came to our house one night, and she was in tears, and she said, "Can I talk to you? I don't feel right. There's something happened. I was at a party, and I suddenly went into a room and began to cry." Well, my wife and I looked at each other, and in the ministry we call Sozo, we're just ready to help people find some freedom. And so we asked Betsy some questions, and some things came out. And one of the things was that her mother died when she was 8 years old, and in some ways she took some of the blame for that. And someone said to her, "Maybe God needed your mother more than you." Well, that was a shock to her. That she thought, how could that be? How could that ever be true? And somewhere inside of Betsy, a wall went up. And somewhere inside of her, the devil hissed like he did it in Eve in the garden and said, "You can't trust God. You can't trust Papa God." And at the end of the night, when God had spoken to her very clearly and she's very calm and the Kleenex box is empty, I asked Betsy a question. And I said, "Betsy, what would it mean if God wasn't the one who took your mother? What would it mean if God wasn't the one who took your mother? What would it mean if God was the first one who grieved?" And Betsy looked at us, and you could tell almost on the inside she's taking kind of a poll. And she finally said, "It would mean," she looked down and she said, "It would mean," she kind of looked up and then she said, "It would mean everything." And I think that that's the case for all of us. If we knew for a fact how much Papa loved us, it would mean everything. You know, when hurricanes hit, we call them acts of God. Lightning strikes, we call them acts of God. And I wonder, why don't we call sunny days acts of God? Why don't we call rainbows acts of God, or snowflakes, or beautiful sunsets acts of God? And when I see sometimes how people and the church often blame God for things, or say that God has this mysterious will and these things happened, and says to 8-year-olds that God needed their mother more than them, I sometimes think that there's somebody getting framed, and I wonder about that. Remember what Satan said to Eve in the garden. He said to Eve, "Hath God really said?" And then he said to Eve, "God knows that if you eat this, you'll be like him, and he doesn't want you like him." And in that instant, Eve created a reality in her mind, a reality about God, about the world, about her trust or non-trust of Papa God, and this wall came up. I see that wall everywhere. I see this idea about the will of God being greatly confused. Let me read for you something that William Sloane Coffin, the late chaplain from Yale University, said about the will of God. Listen to this. "People have some very goofy ideas about how the will of God operates. I guess it was the will of God. As if it's the will of God that anybody gets blown up, that anybody gets shot. God was not behind the wheel of the car. My son was. His son had died in an accident previously. God's heart was the first of all hearts to break. God was not in the event. God was in the response to the event." What is hard for people to realize is that we really do have free will. You have to have free will if love is to be the name of the game. And if we have free will, we are free to do good and free to do bad, free to kill and free to love. To blame God for what people do with their freedom is not fair, except in the same way you'd blame an adult if you saw a child smash an expensive watch.
I think when you blame an adult is
when you blame an adult if you saw a child smash an expensive watch. It's your fault for giving the child the watch in the first place, maybe. Now, we can blame God for giving us free will and human freedom. Maybe we're not ready for it. Maybe we can't handle it. I've been confused about that too, and it really caused a distance between me and God, but I found a secret. And that secret is to look at Jesus, because Jesus is the best picture of God ever taken. Because Jesus is the best picture of God ever taken. It says in Hebrews that God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers through the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days he has spoken to us through his Son. Jesus himself says to Thomas, he says, look, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I think that we should question anything that we think about God that we don't see in the life of Jesus and we don't hear in the words of Jesus. Jesus is God's highest, best, and consummate and most accurate expression of the essence of God's character. God's purposes, his gentle and firm ways among needy men and women are to be observed in Jesus. His reaction to demonic intrusion is an exact representation of his Father's. His reaction to those caught shamefully in sin is precisely the way we should see his Father react. The ways of him among broken-hearted men and women, his attitude and his action toward disease, what he did at funerals accurately reflect his Father's will. You know, Jesus destroyed or disrupted every funeral that he came to because people die untimely deaths outside of the will of God. His dealings with false apostles, with hypocrites, with money changers, exactly mirror his Father's intense anger. And Jesus makes one thing very clear. Jesus makes one thing very clear. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy, but I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. It seems to me it's a simpler question, it's a simpler answer, and that is, if it looks like stealing and killing and destroying in your life, if it feels like stealing and killing and destroying, it's probably not God. But if it feels like abundant life, lavish and free, it probably is Papa. His fingerprints are on that. He's behind it in some way. I want to read for you a quote from the Message Bible in closing. It's a quote that Jesus says. He's talking about his Father. He's talking about his Papa. He's talking about Abba. It's from Luke chapter 12, verse 29. Listen to this. Listen to what he says. What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, not to be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to Papa's giving. People who don't know God and the way he works fuss over these things, but you know God, and you know how he works. Steep yourself in this God reality, in this God initiative, in this God provision. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Don't be afraid of missing out. You are my dearest friends, and your Father God only wants to give you the kingdom. I want to encourage you today to think about your own picture of Father God. How did that picture come about? How does it feel to you? Does Papa feel warm and inviting? Or does he seem like someone who maybe would take away a mother for an 8-year-old to teach her a lesson? What would it mean to you if your picture was flawed? What would it mean to you if, in fact, he was much better than you ever thought he was? What would that mean? Maybe you'll say, like Betsy, it would mean everything. I'm Andy Reese with the Freedom Resource. God bless you.